So it's 5 o'clock. It's time to begin our Board of Health meeting. Christy, I'll have you read.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Oh,
This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. Christy, would you read the statement that we need to put in for the executive order? I mean, the executive order of the meeting we're having electronically, please.
yes, sir. So we'll need a motion to declare that it's a necessity to hold the meeting electronically due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is in accordance with Executive Order number 16, issued by Governor Lee on March 20th, 2020, and extended by Executive Order number 71.
I so move.
I so move.
Okay, I've got let me ask you to give your name so we get it for the minutes. Who made the motion? I heard 2 or 3.
City House, I so move.
Thank you, Cindy.
T. Stillwell, I'll second it.
Thank you, Dr. Joel. We have a proper motion and second to do this meeting. All in favor, just say aye.
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 Those opposed?
I'm sorry, we're not quite understanding. Is that opposed to the meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Aye.
I'm sorry, we're not opposed to the meeting.
Thank you.
We're in favor. Thank you.
So at this time, would you call the roll? Who's on here today? Shana, are you on here?
Yes, Sharon Draper is right here with me, Kimberly Dom.
Well, I got to get the roll call.
Ms. Dom. Hey,
Hello.
Rogers. Ms. Dom, go ahead and mute
Yes.
your mic because he's talking just to the board members only right now.
Okay, hello.
Thank you. Shanna, would you do the roll call, please, or Brian, one of you?
Yes, sir, I can do that. Rogers Anderson,
Anderson here.
Sam Bastian,
Here.
Charlie Beecham,
Here.
Cindy Howes,
Present.
Kathy Montgomery,
Montgomery here.
Martin Myers,
Myers here.
Gary Owen, Dr. Owen. And C. Dr. Owen.
Gary's here.
All right, thank you. C.A. Stillwell.
Yes,
Stillwell
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Mandy Thompson. Mandy, your mic's currently muted. There you go.
All right, I'm here.
Very good, thank you. And then Rhonda Watson.
Rhonda's here.
Okay, Mayor, everyone's here.
Thank you. The first item of business that we have tonight will be the approval of the minutes that were sent to you for the December the 15th, 2020 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to get that up on the floor, please.
Myers, so moved.
Thank you.
T. Stillwell, second.
Oh, second.
Thank you. At this time, we'll vote on the minutes. We will not do a roll call on this. If you're in opposition to the minutes from the December 15th meeting, please let it be known. Otherwise, we will go on. I see no one complaining against the minutes. Brian, show that unanimous. The first order of business that we have tonight is to request approval for the installation of an experimental primary and secondary advanced treatment system, along with several setback reductions and curtain drain eliminations to serve an existing structure so as to allow its renovation to proceed. This is Tyler McIntosh at 5519 Sycamore Street, Leapers Fork, Tennessee 37064. Let's get this on the floor for a motion, and we'll have Brian to explain it. We'll ask questions, and then we'll let the guests speak accordingly. Do I have a motion?
House so moves.
Thank you, Cindy. Do I have a second?
Ashton, second.
Thank you, Sam. Brian, would you explain to us what we're doing here on this piece of property at 5519 Sycamore Street?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Yeah, the department staff has been working with the applicant, who is the current owner, Mr. McCulloch, for the last year or so, regarding some extensive renovations that he's doing to the structure on the property. It's a very small house. It's about a little over 1,000 square feet. The property itself is really small, as most in Leapers Fork are. It's just right at 1/4 of an acre. The house was built back in the early 1950s, according to the tax records. And so when we first started dealing with Mr. McCulloch, he was wanting to do some interior renovations to the structure. And upon processing his application, we realized that they'd already done quite a bit of work inside. They'd kind of gutted the inside and replaced a bunch of the floor joists. And so the nature of the renovation was pretty substantial. It was very structural in nature. And so there was no permit to do that type of work at the time. So the county issued a stop work order until all the appropriate approvals and all the permits could be obtained. And that included the septic permits as well. So when we first started working with this piece of property, looked in the records of the department files, we didn't have a lot of information on the system for the property. There was a few pieces of documents regarding some failures from years past, but there was no records of the initial installation. There's no permits, no inspection reports and things of that nature, probably due to the age of the system. So there's no way to kind of confirm the installation integrity and the standards of how it was installed. And so it's actually classified as an undocumented and non-conforming system to the current regulations. And so based on the letter of intent from Mr. McCulloch and his consultants and the other associated information that he provided, floor plans and whatnot, the intentions include some really major interior renovations, some other exterior renovations that weren't that major, weren't that substantial. But the main thing to keep in mind is once the renovations were completed, the structure was still going to contain 2 bedrooms with no oversized tubs, which is what the structure is currently right now. But again, due to the extensive nature of these structural renovations, the department policy, the current policy in place, requires that the septic system that serves that structure comply with the current regulations. So that would entail completely abandoning the existing system and then locating a new primary and secondary areas, both in usable soils. And so that became what the challenge was, as with a lot of the systems that we bring to you, is finding suitable soil to support the installation of a new system. Again, being in the Leapers Fork area, sewer is not available to this property, and there's no opportunity for offsite easements as well. So Mr. McCulloch retained the services of several consultants. He hired a soil scientist consultant, engineering consultants, and surveying consultants to kind of work through this process. They've all been working on soil maps, engineering documents, survey documents, giving us a good plan of action for a new system to serve the needs. The first step in that was the soil work. They hired Michael Harbauer to do some soil work on the property and evaluate the soils on the property. But what he discovered is none of the soils on the property met regulation criteria for any kind of standard type septic system that would meet regulations. There was one good size area in the rear of the property, pretty substantial size. It contained shallow soils that were disturbed, had some mixed fill in it. They were varying depths before they encountered restrictive layers of clay and rock. But it would allow us to look at exploring some kind of experimental type system. But the property is also very small, as I mentioned earlier. And so, trying to apply today's standards with setbacks is something that's kind of impossible to do. So that kind of compounded our challenges. So the basis of our approach was looking at using an experimental advanced treatment system. Let's clean that wastewater up to secondary quality levels like we've done on several systems in the past, but also try to expand the size of the area as much as we could. So to do that, we looked at reducing some of the setback requirements that the current regulations require that today's the property out there just probably couldn't ever meet. So I've listed those in the report, and I want to make sure that those get into the record. Those setback distance requirements that are being adjusted include the septic field area to the property lines being reduced from 20 foot to 10 foot. The septic field areas to the structure being reduced from 25 foot to approximately 9 feet. The septic field areas from an overhead electric line being reduced from 25 feet to 5 feet. The system laterals being reduced from 25 foot to a proposed retaining wall to 10 foot. The number 5 is the tanks to the property line being reduced from 20 foot to 5 foot, and the tanks to the structure being reduced from 10 foot to 8 foot. And then the final system is the supply line, the system piping network being reduced from 10 foot to the property line to just about 1 foot. So still maintained on that property. Again, I want to make sure to point out that most of these setback reductions conform to those of the property's era and those of most of the neighboring properties within the Leapers Fork area already. So it's not something new to that area. And so by applying these setbacks, we were able to kind of get a good usable size area to install a septic field in the rear of the property. So in order to justify those setbacks and using the soil that we talked about, again, we wanted to use some kind of advanced treatment system to clean that wastewater up ahead of time before we distribute it into the soil. And so in this particular case, the engineer firm and the engineers that have proposed using the Quanix aerosol biofilter system. So it's the system that the board's seen several times over the years. If you recall, it's the system that uses the foam cubes inside the media. So the wastewater is sprayed across the foam media, and as it trickles through that foam media, it cleans up that wastewater. And again, it cleans it up to NSF standard 40, so it has independently certified to get secondary quality treatment. The particular unit and the design criteria that the engineer has specified gives it about a 40% safety factor in the sizing of that unit. They also plan to recirculate the wastewater to clean it up even more to further ensure the water quality before it's dispersed into the soil. Like most of the advanced treatment systems, this particular design incorporates internet-based monitoring plan to provide independent electronic verification of all the maintenance and service for the life of the system. This design, it mirrors the state regulations for these types of systems. And it also includes perpetual operation maintenance for the system, for the life of the system, to be done by a state licensed service provider that's qualified to do that. For the actual dispersal, once the wastewater is treated, again, we're looking at using that soil area I talked about before and building a modified low pressure system in that. The soil area will require some remediation. So they'll have to do some remediation to the site. They will bring in about 26 to 30 inches of soil and build up a good base to give a substantial base for the absorption of that effluent, and also include a 10-foot buffer of soil around that so as to gradually slope back to the property lines. So the design engineer was able to get a good design for the primary. One of the things that's different from this system and other ones that the board has looked at in the past has to do with the secondary system. In most situations, what we presented to you is to build a Wisconsin mound, an elevated mound system over top of that primary system for secondary treatment. This particular property wasn't conducive for us to build a mound system on it. The slopes were just a little bit too great and a little bit too steep to allow for the stable installation of that mound system. So in this particular case, the engineering team decided to, if the primary system was ever to fail, to basically go in and remove all that soil, remove that piping network, and then rebuild it back in that same place. And so we've looked at that and we're very comfortable with that approach as well. One of the other final things that we had to look at to kind of optimize the system and the performance of the system was a slight modification to some pipe sizing. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out because the regulations require a minimum pipe size of 2 inch. In this particular case, the design engineer is using 1.5 inch diameter pipe, but they've also ensured the hydraulic performance of the system. So there's no issues with doing that. And we're very comfortable with that as well. And then finally, the final thing that we looked at had to do with any kind of curtain drain associated with the system. Typically there'll be a curtain drain associated with this type of system, but because of the site constraints and the soil properties and the shallowness to rock, the soil scientists didn't feel that there was any need for that curtain drain, so we've eliminated that requirement. So looking at the approval steps to get this approved, again, the consulting team that I mentioned previously, they've turned in their design work to us. The engineers have completed their preliminary design. We've reviewed it, we've accepted it, we're very comfortable with it. So pending the outcome of this board meeting, the plans just need to be finalized and approved. The exact same with the survey document. The surveyor has submitted his location map drawing. We've reviewed it, we're very comfortable with it as well. In accordance with our regulations, any kind of experimental system, of course, requires Board of Health approval. And also, per regulations, all experimental systems will require a restrictive covenant recorded against the deed to the property. So this legal agreement will spell out all the restrictions and approval requirements. It's recorded against the deed to the property, and it follows the land, so any future owners have to abide by that. With all these experimental advanced treatment systems, perpetual operation and maintenance is going to be required. Will have to be performed by a state licensed service provider. That also includes routine effluent sampling to make sure that the system is treating the wastewater properly. That internet-based monitoring program I mentioned will be a requirement, and that's got to be installed and maintained for the life of the system. And then finally, they'll have to hire a service provider that will do the operation and maintenance. So it's not something the homeowner does himself. There's a qualified professional that does that. The final two things is issuance of the permit, paying of the fee, and then installing the system. So based upon everything that's been presented, the plan of action, based on the soil and site conditions, the department perceives no adverse impacts to the protection of public health or the environment by granting this variance request. It provides a good, properly sized system to treat the wastewater needs for this property for many years to come. It also provides a good, solid secondary system in case that primary system should ever fail. So with that being said, I know that I sent out the packet of information with all the attached documents so that you would have an opportunity to look at that ahead of time. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain. I'll also mention that the owner, Mr. Tyler McCullough, is on the call and he can answer questions. The engineering team from T-Square Engineering is also here if you have any questions. And I think there's a neighbor that's on the call too, Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Before we get the comments from the neighbor, are there any questions of the board members that they have about the presentation that Brian has made on this location at 5519 Sycamore Street, Leapers Fork?
Hey, Brian, I just had one question. So I was looking at the site map here where the X or the asterisk is, and was just wondering if that's the location. I was trying to get a better view of it because it looked like the easement for the driveway. I was just trying to make sure that wasn't going to be going over that site.
Right. No, the X that I put in red, that's just to designate which property it is. So the actual system will be back into the rear, in the green space back in the rear. So yeah, it will not impact the driveway. There's a portion of the driveway, there's a turnaround behind the house that we're going to remove and remediate and use a portion of that. But the actual driveway up along the property line is not going to be impacted. And you can kind of see that on the site plan. I'll scroll down a few pages to get to the site plan, get to it. Yeah, oops, go back up one. You can kind of see right here, the road is up at the top of the page. The driveway comes along the right side and the septic field is in the rear.
Other questions? get your question answered, Kathy? Okay. Any other questions from the board members?
Brian, I just had a question. This is Marty, regarding the system piping setback. Just a logistics thing. If it drops from 10 feet to 1 foot, does that mean if there was another system next to it that that had to have the same type of setbacks, that the system piping could actually be within 2 feet of each other?
Theoretically, that could be the case, but in actuality, it is not. The adjacent property owner is Mr. Melvin Broadwater on that particular side that we're talking about. And his driveway runs along that side. Plus there's a grassy area, and his system is way over into his property, much deeper. So it wouldn't impact anything on his property. Plus this pipe will stay on this property. Even when they install it, the equipment, everything will stay on this particular property.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions of the board members? So I know we have at least one individual in the chat part of this. We have a neighbor that I will call upon. I think, is it Ms. Dames? Is it, if I've got that correctly? I need for you to identify yourself and your legal address so we can get that into the minutes and any questions that you may have.
Karen Draper.
It's actually my mother, Sharon Draper. She lives at
5515.
5515 Sycamore Street, right next door.
Okay, and your
My-
comment?
Kimberly Dom. No one was informed of any of this. My comment,
Some of the questions that we
I'm
wrote down
concerned
here.
about the piping. I'm concerned about all of it. Also, please go ahead.
So there've been some conflicts between these two neighbors regarding the properties, some damage that's been done, disputes as to.
Let me interrupt you. Who is speaking now? I was talking to one person and now I need for you to identify yourself so we can get it into the records, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm Christopher. I'm her son-in-law here with her daughter, and Ms. Draper sitting with us.
And you live where? What's your address?
I live right next door, sir.
And on that driveway, there is a fence
And
that does not show in the drawing there.
and what address number is that, ma'am? I'm just trying to get it for the record.
515.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead with your comments.
I'm going to have Christopher speak to me. I'm
Okay.
80, and so Christopher will speak for me.
So a couple of questions that Ms. Draper was wondering is there's been some conflict between the property lines and the fence and some damage that's been done. So there's a big concern here about how they plan to actually put this in and what kind of impact this could have to 5515, because things have been done next door to Ms. Draper in the past and equipment has damaged fences and et cetera. So there's concern if there's going to be a major construction property with the next door property, could that have a adverse impact on her property in doing so? And I'll just outline a couple of things that they asked me to write down as we were going through this. They apparently have talked with some of the other neighbors who were unaware of what's going on here, and there was some concern. So I don't know what the notification process was, and I know it was relatively short notice for this meeting, but obviously Ms. Draper is concerned that if we're putting in some type of system directly next door to her, what might impact that might have on her property, either indirectly, intentionally, or unintentionally, both in the construction process as well as the long-term impact.
And the fence, pulled out my fence.
And the fence and how equipment's going to get back there to do that with, because they were doing some renovations in the past and the fence got torn down and then there was a dispute as to who did it. So there's just some concern about the process of how this is going to be put in and how we're going to make sure that Ms. Draper is protected and not adversely impacted.
Good question. I'll transfer it first over to Brian and let him address some of those issues. As far as the notice, I think this meeting was advertised in accordance with the law. I'm not sure what that date time is, but I'll let Brian deal with that, or Christie. Brian?
Yes, sir. As far as the notification, yes, sir. Proper notification was given. We also have to send letters to the adjacent property owners. And so I think that's how you received notification of the meeting. And so all the adjacent property owners were notified via letter, and the neighbors across the street as well.
No, they didn't know either. They didn't
You
know
didn't?
they weren't aware either. No.
You didn't receive the letter?
Not at my house. It came out to my daughter's house.
It came to my house on Natchez Trace Road. And I immediately took it to my mother. I got back in town yesterday. It came in Saturday, and there wasn't time to even make our point or questions, which it had said by the 15th. I didn't receive it by that date.
I talked to the other neighbor, and they did not receive a notice either.
Yeah, we went around yesterday and asked if they had received a notice, and they had not.
Well, I did speak with Mr. Broadwater earlier today, so I know he got his notification. And he is the adjacent property owner next door. And as far as where it went to, we would have used the tax card. What's on the tax roll is the addresses for the property. So I can double check that, but I know that those notifications did go out properly. Regarding your questions and your concerns, as far as doing the construction, they'll have to maintain and stay on the site. It's something that we will do. The county will be involved in the inspection of the installation of this system throughout. There should be no reason that they go across the property line to do any kind of work. Everything is being maintained on this property itself. So there shouldn't be any damage to any kind of existing fences or anything like that. As far as any kind of previous damages, that's something I don't know and am not aware about. The owner, Mr. McCullough, is on the line, and that's something that he might can address. But the system itself, part of the safeguards of this system, by doing an advanced treatment system and cleaning up the wastewater to secondary quality levels, is to ensure that it won't negatively impact any of the adjacent property owners. So we're going above and beyond what the current regulations require to clean up the wastewater before it enters the ground. So it's actually a much better type of system than a standard type system. And there's safeguards built into that, as I talked about in the presentation, as far as independent certifications, independent verification for the life of the system. So there will be monitoring and maintenance that has to be done to the system to ensure that it works for the entire life of the system. And that legal agreement that I mentioned spells all that out, and it's tied to the deed to the property. So any future owner is bound by those restrictions and those requirements as well. And then I want to go back to the notification. Again, the reason, and our office manager just gave me the tax card. The tax card, what's listed as the proper address is the Natchez Trace Road address.
Anything?
So who did you say has to do the inspections on a periodic basis? Did you say the property owner or some independent government entity?
So two things. One is the county will inspect the installation of the system, but as far as the operation and maintenance, the owner will have to hire a licensed professional that has a license to operate and maintain these type of systems. And that person will have to come out and periodically monitor and maintain the system, check on it, make sure that it's functioning properly. They'll have to pull effluent samples to make sure that it's meeting all the sampling requirements that's built into that legal agreement. And so there'll have to be a contract in place with that service provider that spells out the frequency in which they'll do all that monitoring.
The owner has tore my fence up to no end and then denied that he did it.
Can I speak to Ms. Draper's comment, sir? Because I have a very different perspective on what they are expressing here. Basically, I have.
Let me interrupt you a second. Would you please identify yourself and your legal address in order to speak?
Yes, sir. This is Tyler McCullough. The property we're talking about, 5519, is my property. And I would put my video on, but it's not working for some reason. So basically, we have gone out of our way to be as respectful as possible throughout the process. I'm not sure why the hostility is being expressed, but what they are referring to is there was an outside dumpster company that we hired to clean up. There was a whole bunch of trash and stuff under the crawl space that we had to clean up initially. And this dumpster truck company, there's an easement there that we were allowed to go. There was no existing driveway on my property to begin with. So there was an easement where we were allowed to go through Miss Draper's driveway and go through the fence. So the dumpster company, when they dropped the dumpster off, apparently they barely scraped one of the posts, and that was on them. That I gave her their contact and everything like that in order to follow up with them. And we
did not.
Yes, we did, ma'am.
No
And
time.
when that happened, I didn't get. Please
Bottom of the fence you guys broke.
Let me
speak
let
during
me-
my time.
let me interrupt you both. I really don't care about the fence. We're here tonight to deal with the issue of the issue here. There are other appropriate ways you all can communicate rather than taking up the Board of Health's time about this, and there's no remedy we can offer for it. If your question or comment is in regards to the proposed request for the installation of an experimental primary and secondary advanced treatment system, I'll entertain it. But all the other issues are outside the venue of this Board of Health. Now, I have said that if the owner would like to continue on with your conversation in regards to how it would relate to the Board of Health meeting tonight, I'm open to that conversation.
Sir, I'm completely open to just skipping over that. I was just responding to the concern.
I understand. Let's go on.
From my perspective, they're completely false. So that's all I wanted to.
Yeah, and if I have to interrupt you, I'll ask the maker of this to turn your speaker off. So keep your comments to what we're talking about tonight. Thank you. Anything else, sir?
No, sir, that was all.
Thank you. And ma'am, would you like to have a comment or question in regards to the experimental primary and secondary advanced treatment system? Any other comments?
I'm completely against it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Brian, could you let me know, does she have a valid point that we mailed it or we did not mail it? You or Christy, either one. If we didn't mail her notice, then I would ask somebody to defer this, but if we mailed her the notice and if it routed someplace else, let me know that too.
Yes, sir. I'm looking at the tax card itself, and the notice was mailed to the Natchez Trace, which is what is listed as the address to mail any documents to. It's not the site address, but it's the mailing address for the owner of the property. And so that's where we mailed that.
Christy, in your best legal advice, have we handled this in accordance with the law, or do we need to defer this for 30 days?
Well, normally we have to give notice to the adjacent property owners. The adjacent property owners in their tax card list the address of their property, but also where they want their notifications sent. So sometimes that address is different than the address of the property itself. I'm concerned that the neighbors have indicated that they spoke with the neighbor, I believe, across the street, and that person was not aware of it as well. And whether that's the case or not, it I guess gives me a little bit of pause that perhaps we need to go back and redo our notification. But as far as the letter of notification going to the address that's on the tax card, that's perfectly acceptable because that's where the property owner has indicated that's where they want their notifications to go.
Okay. So Brian, from a standpoint of procedures here, Um, would this hurt if we delayed this until our March meeting?
Mr. Mayor, can I ask another quick question of your legal counsel? Is there a statute
No, sir.
as
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. Let me get my question answered, and when you get ready, I'll ask for some more comments. We're trying to
Absolutely.
conduct business here. Brian, is there any reason that we couldn't roll this until March?
There's
Excuse
no,
me, February.
right. There's no reason on behalf of the department. No, sir.
Okay. Now, the owner, Mr. McCollum, your comments?
Sir, I believe that everyone was notified. I believe they're expressing a false premise because they don't want this to go through for whatever reason. All I'm trying to do is rehab a house, so it's going to improve the whole neighborhood. I've been on pause for over 14 months now, and I'm paying large payments to my bank every month. This is crippling me financially, especially during COVID. So another 2 months will really severely hurt me even more. So if there's any way we can proceed, I would highly appreciate that. I believe Brian did notify everybody, and I was told that that was the county's responsibility.
Also, we know the neighbor across the street. I don't believe they would object at all because that's Lester.
I'm on very good terms with the neighbors across
At
the street.
the very end of the block, they had
Again,
not, they did not
again,
know. Butch
folks.
did not know.
Again, folks, this is a Board of Health meeting. We're trying to conduct business. Christy, give me your legal opinion on this.
I think it would probably be best, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately to Mr. McCullough, that just so there's no question whatsoever about the action that the board takes, just defer it next month. We'll paper the neighborhood with letters. And that way the action that's taken, there can be absolutely no question.
All right, and so the next meeting will be, Brian, can you look on your calendar and see when that next meeting, and do we have time to get it all done? February 16th?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yes,
Okay,
sir. And we have plenty of time.
all right. So in view of the fact what legal has said, we did have a motion to hear this tonight. I'll ask for who made the motion on this, and let's pull that back off and do the deferral until February based upon legal's comments tonight. Who made the motion? Brian, did you copy that?
Ms. House made the motion.
Okay. Cindy, would you take your motion back? You're on mute. You're on mute, Cindy. There you go.
Sorry. Yes, sir. I would be willing to take that motion back at this time.
Thank you. And who made the second, please?
Was it me?
Sam.
Sorry, I'm looking.
Yeah.
It was Dr. Bastian.
Yeah, I'll take back my second.
Okay, thank you. Now we're back to the beginning. So can I have a motion to defer this to the February 16th, 2021 Board of Health meeting, at which time we will ask the staff to double check and make sure everybody gets notification. Do I have a motion for that?
Cindy House so moves.
Thank you, Sandy. Do I have a second?
Okay.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second to defer this. This is non-debatable. Brian, would you call roll? You or Sean, one of the two?
Yes, sir.
The motion
Rogers
is,
Anderson. Go ahead.
Anderson votes yes.
Sam Bastian,
Yes.
Charlie Beecham, Charlie, unmute your mic. Charlie Beecham. Charlie, can you hear me? Let me skip Charlie and come back. Cindy Howes,
Yes.
Kathy Montgomery,
Yes.
Martin Myers,
Yes.
Gary Owen. Gary, you're on mute. Unmute. There you go. Gary. You're on mute, Gary. Unmute Gary. Okay, we'll come back to Gary Owen. CA Stillwell,
Yes.
Dr. Stillwell, thank you. Mandy Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson. Thank you.
Yes.
Rhonda Watson.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Okay, Rhonda, thank you. Rhonda. Charlie
Yes.
Beecham. Charlie, can you hear us? Charlie Beecham. I don't think you can hear us, Mr. Anderson. Gary Owen. Signify by waving at me, Gary. I think Gary's having some difficulties, Mayor Anderson, but you have enough votes to pass.
What was the vote count?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
8 yes,
yeses.
2 couldn't vote.
Thank you. The motion to defer passes. Moving on, we'll see everyone on this agenda, February 16th meeting. The final item we have tonight on our agenda is the designated representative of the department in the absence of the director for the year 2021. Brian?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I just want to recall and refresh everyone's memory from last year. If you'll recall, last year, the board passed a resolution adopting a policy of authority within our department. And so at that time, what that resolution does is it gives someone the authority, a designee, the authority to execute subdivision plats and other official documents on behalf of the department in my absence. And
I have my-
someone to also be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the department. So we adopted that policy of authority back in April of last year. And at that time, we also approved Mr. Bart Skelton to be that designee. So it's for the period of the calendar year of 2020. So we have to redo that appointment every year at the first scheduled meeting that the board has of every year. So at this time, I'd like to hereby designate Bart Skelton for that term of 2022, and it'll be until the first, for 2021, it'll be in effect till the first board meeting of 2022. And so I respectfully request that the board confirm this appointment.
Thank you, Brian, for that. Do I have a motion to accept the recommendation for Bart being the fill-in in the event Brian's not here?
So moved.
Thank you, Martin. Do I have a second?
Sam, second.
Thank you, Sam.
Second.
Gary, are you trying to get in? Gary, are you trying to get in? I'll vote in just a second. Gary, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Thumbs down? Sideways? Okay. Brian, do a
Yes,
roll
I can
call.
hear you, and I have the microphone. I have the microphone turned on, but it's not working.
Oh, we can hear you fine now, so we'll take it as you're ready to vote this time. Brian, would you go down to the roll call on the Bart Skelton replacement in the event you're not here?
Yes, sir. Rogers Anderson,
Anderson, yes.
Sam Bastian,
Bastian, yes.
Charlie Beecham,
Yes.
thank you. Cindy Howes,
Yes.
Kathy Montgomery,
Montgomery, yes.
thank you. Martin Myers,
Yes.
Gary Owen. Gary, you were there just a second ago. Give us a thumbs up, Gary, if you can hear us. We'll come back to Gary. CA Stillwell?
Yes.
There we go. We got Gary. Dr. Stillwell?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mandy Thompson?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Rhonda Watson?
I'm here again. It's just not working. I'm sorry.
We got you, Gary.
Can
Thank
you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We got you. Rhonda?
Yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous, Chairman Anderson.
Electronics, they're wonderful when it works. I think Gary, you've probably got a bandwidth problem. You're fading in and out.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Nothing we can do to help you on that. So thanks to everyone for being here. We will plan to have a February the 16th meeting, and to the applicant, we will be sure your item's the first in line in case we have any others. But please understand, we're not trying to delay
Okay.
anything. We understand your comments, but we need to follow the law too, by the letter of the law, be sure that all the i's have been dotted and t's have been crossed. Anything else?
Yes, sir. Mayor Anderson, just wanted to make sure that you recognize we have a new member on the board tonight, Miss Mandy Thompson, representing the school board.
Thank you, man. Glad to have her aboard.
You're welcome.
You've got good bandwidth. You're coming in loud and strong. Anything else to come before the Board of Health meeting? I tried to call Charlie. Charlie, if you're listening, I tried to call you on your cell phone. Can you hear us?
Been trying to avoid COVID.
Well, Charlie,
And I know what's happening tonight. I don't want to talk about it.
oh, he's talking about a little basketball game. Anything else to come before the hey, we ain't even got a football coach right now. We're doing everything we can.
I'm really upset about that one.
All right. How about a motion to adjourn? It looks like Sam's waiting to give me a motion.
So moved.
All right.
good.
Anybody else?
Second.
Thank you all. See you next month.
Thank y'all.
Bye, y'all.